I just want you to know, for me, I believe this. You are one of two things. You are either an asset or you are a liability. If you do not know which one that you are a liability. Let that sink in for a second. How do you want to leave this earth? What kind of legacy are you going to leave? I'm going to tell you something. Every time I interact with a human being, I remember. People don't remember what you know, they remember how you make them feel. Never forget that. Every time you interact with someone, you have an opportunity to make their life a little bit better. Hi all, I'm Micah Smith here with another episode of Rebuild and Rise. And today it is me. And what I wanted to talk about is I actually wanted to talk about building and growing a business and a successful business at that. And so this month marks my 4-year anniversary of owning Micah Abigail. And so during this time, this entire month has been a month of crazy change, deep self-reflection, and obviously I wanted to share with you, while it's all top of mind, just exactly what has taken me to get to where I am today and what it truly takes to be a successful business owner. And it's not to say I know everything, but I know enough to be dangerous. And so I wanted to just start at the beginning of my journey. So I wanted to talk about what it was that pushed me into entrepreneurship. And so when I started in this journey, it was 5 years ago. And so it's actually a little bit more than that. And it was during COVID. I remember my position had drastically shifted. So I was an outside sales representative. I was doing presentations all over the country, doing business to business. And when I was brought inside because of COVID, I was like, okay, can I really even do this? Can I sit behind a desk? Can I talk to the consumer? And it was during this time that there were epiphanies and aha moments. And if you've ever been part of a company that is constantly trying to suppress who you are, they never edify you, they never train you, they never lift you up, right? You're gonna have to always be finding people to do that for you, or just constantly finding ways to build yourself. And so that's what I did. But I will say that my confidence level was not very high when I was with this organization for a multitude of reasons. One, again, they never edified me. There was never a good job. There was never a thank you. There was also never this innate understanding of actually how good I really was at the business. And I also, on top of not being edified and not being trained and not being given any sort of leadership whatsoever from my organization, on top of all of that, I also still was battling with alcoholism. And so the two things combined were going to stop me from being the person that I was meant to be. And so during COVID, I will tell you this, I was in the trenches. I was talking to hundreds of clients a week. I was setting them up for success to get their mortgages. And I was looking at credit reports and moving things around to the point where people are just getting approved from not even having to go through credit restoration, which is one of my gifts. And it's what my company does. Like, we can look at credit reports all day and we're like, move this, move this, move this, move this, move this. And then boom, you'll see a massive score influx and then the loan can get approved. And that's our job, to do that all day, every day. Well, it was during COVID that I had an opportunity to speak with this woman, and I was able to help her and her husband close their loan without ever putting them through credit restoration. And it was at this exact moment that I knew deep down that I had to start my own company. And the reason why was because I felt that there was something lacking, and it was customization, care to the umpteenth degree, and absolute and utter hand-holding throughout the entire process. And so for me, I said, I need to create something where this takes place in every transaction. And if it doesn't stem from the top, it's not going to happen. And the old organization that I used to work for, one of the policies that they had in place was no outbound phone calls. And they would not reach out to customers they would not take the initiative to reach out to customers, update them on their progress as to how they were doing. And this was something where I was like, well, like if we can do that, and if we can really just show the client how much we care, not only will they be more likely to get through the program, but they'll probably make less mistakes. And so I was like, let me create something that holds the client's hand a little bit more, because what I have found in this credit industry is that none of us have been taught this stuff in high school or in college. And when I was learning this business, I was given like the bare bones minimum to go out and do these presentations. And then after that, I started learning on my own. And I just started to realize that people have no idea how this stuff works. And for me, like even grasping some of the most basic principles in my industry, it probably took me a full year. And so having that understanding and that appreciation for what it took to understand these things, I'm like, there needs to be a lot more hand-holding done in this industry. And so I set out to open my own firm, and I had no idea how I was going to do it. And I found some of the most educational content that I could possibly, so I spent so much money, like literally everything I had, I spent on educating myself on how to build a business. Because there was one thing I knew, is I knew how credit worked, I knew how to move around the pieces, but I didn't know how credit restoration worked. I didn't know how the back end worked. I'd never been privy to it, nobody taught me it, and so I was like, I need to figure out how this works. And so I sat with specialists and I took hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of courses and spent hundreds of hours. And then all of a sudden I took what I learned and I applied it. And so I worked for an entire year completely pro bono, just to make sure that when I was ready to open, the product that I pushed out was something, one, that was repeatable, and two, it was something, I don't test a paid product on a client because I don't feel like, in my heart of hearts, that is not something that I'm okay with. And so for me, I wanted to make sure that my product was at least client worthy enough for a small fee. And so with that being said, one of the biggest things that I talk about, and if you are someone who has a dream or you have ambitions or you have any sort of goals in life, here's one of the biggest things that I tell people all the time is you need to run to something. You don't run away from something. There's a large difference between the two. And running away from something usually means that there's a lot of little broken pieces that you're carrying with you that you're going to carry with you into your next venture. And for me, building a company, becoming an entrepreneur, I wasn't running away from anything. I was treated very, very poorly by the organization that I worked for. And as poorly as I was treated, I still wasn't unhappy. I still wasn't discontent. I'm the type of person where I'm super grateful because I looked at it like this, like I have an opportunity to serve clients in such a magnificent way. And I really did work autonomously, which I loved. And so I was an entrepreneur. I worked in the business as though I owned the business. And I treated my clients like absolute kings and queens. And that was the thing, like people knew like my character was one that of a noble woman. And so for me, going into entrepreneurship, it was something that I was terrified. I mean, straight up terrified, because I didn't have the qualifications to become a business owner. But yet, as I sat and reflected, right? So one of my favorite things that I always say is life cannot be understood. It has to be lived forwards, but understood backwards. And so for me, as I look back in hindsight, what was really interesting is that everything I ever gravitated towards, whether it was books or events, or I would go to these major workshops, it was always geared towards people with their own companies. And it was so interesting how all these books that I had been reading my entire life were all about building a company that would be great, that would stand the test of time. And it's so bizarre to me that I would pick up these types of books. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm like, I actually have a lot more in my arsenal than I think. And so fast forward about a year, so a year of doing pro bono work, I am ready to go. I've got this amazing product. And I will tell you, I was just like, okay, I was so scared. I was so nervous. And I was like, what if I'm not as good as I think? What if people don't like me? What if nobody wants to use me? And what if this is all a facade? I mean, all of these seeds of doubt just came flooding into my mind. And the craziest thing is, here's how God works. And I want to express to all of you just the amount of faith that I have. So even getting here to New York, like I've always felt a pull and a call, right? So when I'm in alignment with my purpose, like I just know. It's like these moments of euphoria that I have where it's just, I'm so in alignment with my purpose and everything just comes together in such a way where things just keep moving forward. Well, to say that I was in alignment with my purpose is literally an understatement. And so what happened is after about a year of doing pro bono work, I had put on my calendar that in 2021, before my birthday, so my birthday falls in October, the middle of October, I said that right before my birthday, I was going to give myself the gift of putting in my 2 weeks notice. And so I didn't know how I was going to do this. I was so nervous. I was so scared. I was like, oh my gosh. And then all of a sudden, I will tell you these feelings of like, well, do you really want to do this? Like, you're comfortable. Like, you have enough to pay your bills. So why rock the boat? You know, do you really want to go into this entrepreneurship, journey where, it's like that there's just so much, there's so many unknowns. And the craziest thing happened. And I have to tell you, this is how big God is when you just keep trusting him and you just keep moving forward. So I got a phone call from the president of the organization that I used to work for. And he never calls me. And I mean never. So I graciously took the call, and long story short, just some hellos were exchanged, and they said, hey, listen, so here's what we're doing. We are eliminating the outside role as you know it, and we are rolling out this new role. And they tried to spin it in a way, right, where it sounded like it was going to be so beneficial for me. And so I was like, oh, okay. I'm like, so you're eliminating my role. Okay, got it. But you're going to give me this option to take its place. Okay, got it. Can I think about it? And so, of course, right, like I get off the phone and I was like, oh my God. I tell my husband, I'm like, you're never going to guess what happened. And so long story short, I thought about it, right? I knew my answer, but I still wanted to think about it regardless. And so I give it about a day, and I let everybody know, hey, listen, I'm putting in my 2 weeks notice. I'm no longer going to be with this organization anymore, and I'm going to move on. Very long story short, that's how we parted ways. And we parted ways very amicably. And it was something where I just kind of sat back and I was like, okay, God. I'm like, you did it again. And I'm just amazed at the grace and the favor that has been put into my life, because essentially I am such a strong woman of faith, and God has moved mountains for me to push me into my purpose. And so here's what I would suggest to all of you when you're tired and when when you just know you're in alignment with your purpose. One of my favorite Bible verses is Romans 8:28, and it says, for all things work together for the good of those who love the Lord and who are called according to his purpose. And God used people who were trying to do things to harm me, but they ended up working out for my own good. They had their ulterior motives, and it ended up working out for good, because I am called to a higher purpose. And so if you are called to a higher purpose and you keep hitting wall after wall after wall after wall, and that's what I kept feeling with this company. Yeah, I didn't have the desire to leave, which is so interesting. I just knew I was on this journey because I knew I needed to get something out of it, right? And then all of a sudden the COVID thing happened, and I couldn't believe myself. And so if you're in this journey and you're just feeling like, I don't really know what's next, I just know I have a purpose, my suggestion to you is keep going, keep walking in faith, keep walking in purpose, and everything you do, give it all you have. And it's funny, I actually had the opportunity just recently. I went to a convention it was a very small group of women entrepreneurs, and we were edified by an unbelievable woman, and we were just talking about just our purpose and the purpose of what we're being called to do. And she said that, Micah, you're a builder, and this is something that, you have a gift of building. And it's so funny because like that is my gift, is I love to build people, and I've been doing it my whole life and without even realizing it. I just want you to know that if you're feeling like you're in a place where you just keep hitting wall after wall after wall, just keep putting in the reps and give everything you have to everything you do. Because no matter where you are, it doesn't matter if, you're in one industry or the next, for you to give it your all, that is doing not only everyone around you good, but it's doing you good as well. You're not going to get anything if you give half of what you have to wherever you are. So, I don't know if you've ever experienced this, and my husband and I, we talk about it all the time, but do you ever go somewhere and your service is so lackluster because you feel like that person just hates their job, and it's like almost like as though they wish that you weren't even there? Well, I've experienced that firsthand, and I always talk about learning from others as to who we don't want to be. And the biggest thing that I would encourage you is be that person to everybody else, because you don't know what somebody is going through. You don't know what a kind word or a smile or just interacting with someone, having eye contact is going to do for their day. So if you're in the service industry, I don't care where you work, but if you have an opportunity to be kind to someone that you're servicing that is there to use your product or your service, give it 100%, because you don't know who's watching. I will tell you, I interact with service people all day, every day, and I'm always looking for people to recruit into my company. And I will tell you, I have had such disheartening experiences, and I thought to myself, like, I would never allow this person to represent my firm, because look how they're representing where they are, right? So to whom much is given, much is required. And I believe that if we're given a little and we scoff at that little that we're given, or we don't treat it well, well, then how can we be expected to be given more? And that's the most important thing to understand, is where you are, that is your purpose at that time. And you need to get everything you can out of where you are currently. And I think that's the most important thing. And so everything I did was about meeting all the right people, making sure that I was becoming the best possible version of myself that I could possibly be. And also, it was during this time, so right before, so I mentioned earlier in the beginning of the podcast, I had mentioned that I hadn't become sober yet. And in my last podcast that just recently launched, I talked about a little piece of you. You are going to have to give something up to become the person you are meant to be. So what are you willing to part ways with? And for me, the first thing that had to go in order for me to become the person that I needed to be is I had to let go of the drinking. I had to say enough is enough. I met my now husband, and we were dating, and he met me when I was sober, and then the alcoholism took course, and I had a really bad month. And by the grace of God, I finally woke up and I was like, I'm done here. I'm done. I called up a good girlfriend of mine who's very open about her sobriety, and I was like, what do I do? Where do I go? Where's the first meeting that I can go to? And I just kept showing up to meeting after meeting after meeting. I was sick. I was pouring sweat. I was detoxing like you've never seen a person detox before. If anybody knows anything about alcohol withdrawal, it is horrific. It is painful. It is dangerous. That and heroin are the only two withdrawals that you can die from. My heart was beating so fast that the doctor thought I was having a heart attack. So I was going in for EKGs. It was no joke. But I knew this was going to be the last time that I would have to suffer through this. I let that version of me die. I said, if you are to become a wife, if you are to become a business owner, this version of you has to die. I said to myself, Micah, if you want to be with a man like Daniel, like my husband, he is going to have an expectation of consistency and reliability. And until you give up that drinking, you cannot be that woman. I knew to be a business owner, I would not be the type of business owner that just left it all to my employees and I walked away without building a culture. That is not who I am. I am one of consistency and reliability. And I was having a group meeting the other night with a bunch of fellow Christians and entrepreneurs, and we were talking amongst ourselves. And I said something. I said something that's really, really important to me as a wife, as a businesswoman, as a person and a human being on this earth. One of my biggest concerns here is being a woman and a person of contribution. I believe in being a contributor to society. I am not here to be a drain on society. I'm here to be a contributor. That is my life's mission. And I give it through my energy. I give it through my time. I do it by doing podcasts like this, like free content for everyone. Like I want you to be inspired and I want you to go live a better life, knowing that it's possible because you're seeing someone who went through really dark, nasty stuff. They came out on the other side triumphant. And from that, I want you to take that and say, I can do it too, because you can. You absolutely can. And I just want you to know, for me, I believe this. You are one of two things. You are either an asset or you are a liability. If you do not know which one that you are a liability. Let that sink in for a second. How do you want to leave this earth? What kind of legacy are you going to leave? I'm going to tell you something. Every time I interact with a human being, I remember. People don't remember what you know, they remember how you make them feel. Never forget that. Every time you interact with someone, you have an opportunity to make their life a little bit better. I still remember, so when I first moved to New York, I remember I met this person at a Starbucks and we became friends. And it was really, really cool. He told me his story. And so his family had immigrated here from China. And so we were talking, and I'm going to actually just tell you one. It's kind of a sidebar conversation, but I want to tell you because it's so cool. But he said, you know, Micah, he's like, when we immigrated here from China, he's like, do you know what day of the year was always our favorite day of the year? And I was like, what day is that? He's like, the day after Christmas. And I was like, okay. I was like, why is that? He's like, because that's when we got all of our presents. I was like, oh. So like all the rich kids would take all of the toys that they didn't like and they would throw them out. And so then they would get those toys that the rich kids had thrown out. He's like, you know, he's like, up until I was like 6 or 7 years old, he's like, I always thought that trucks had 3 wheels. And I was like, oh my goodness gracious. And this person, so this is how he was raised. He was born into a very, very modest family. And then he's now a very prominent cardiac surgeon in New York City. And so I went to his office in New York City, and on the wall was written an inscription in Chinese. And I was like, that's really cool. I was like, what does that say? And he's like, well, let me sum it up for you. He's like, it's a Chinese proverb. And he said, we as doctors, he said, we have an obligation to treat our clients as though their first time is our first time. And he said, a lot of times in any industry, we get so used to going through the motions. And so it might be your 1,000th time telling someone that they have a disease or something debilitating. But for the first time in their life, it's that person is hearing it. And he said, it's really important that we never lose that understanding or that ability to be empathetic or sympathetic with our clients. And we always have to treat their first time as though it's our first time. And I just sat there for a second and I was like, oh my God. I'm like, this is literally something that I've embodied my whole life. I have such conviction, passion, and enthusiasm. And for me, no matter how many times I repeat the same thing over and over and over again, that resonates with me because I always have to remember that their first time is their first time, and I can't treat it as though it's my 1,000th because it comes across as very flippant. You have to understand, right, when we're servicing people, it is a privilege to be able to serve them and to help them when they're in a time of need. And that never left me. And so when I started building my company and I started building my business, I had all of these principles embedded into it. But on top of that, it was that people are not a number, right? People just are not a number. And one of the biggest things that I've learned, because I read avidly, right? I try to read a book a week, and I love knowledge, I love information. And something really powerful that I've embedded also into my company as well. A lot of these companies that fall flat on their face, and they could go public and they fall flat on their face after a certain amount of time. One of the biggest things that takes companies down is when they become so focused on the profit over the service, over the people. And I had a really great podcast with my friend Lindsay Stevens, who's part of the Stevens real estate team. She owns the Stevens real estate team. And one of the biggest things she talked about was, she's like, I think I'm really good at making money because I don't care about it. And I would have to say the same thing. Like, I'm really good at making money because I don't care about it. It's never been about money for me. Money doesn't motivate me, and it never has. And for me, it's about building, it's about growing, and it's about coming up with solutions. If you can constantly find solutions to people's problems, you will never have to worry about having an income. Because if you just keep solving problems, people are going to pay you to solve their problems. It's the most overlooked thing in business. And one of the biggest things that people think about in business all the time is they're constantly putting out, like I see all these owners and they're putting out these arbitrary numbers of these goals that they want to hit. Don't get me wrong, it's amazing and important to have goals, but there has to be a reason behind them. And one of the greatest things that I ever read is growing just to grow, hitting an arbitrary number in business, like, let's say hitting a $30 million a year in revenue number just to hit it, is like eating just to get fat. It doesn't make sense. And eventually you're gonna get sick and die. And that's what people are missing when it comes to business. They're just constantly chasing with no real end in mind. And for me, it's always been about the person I have to become in order to manage or grow that type of an organization. And so for me, as I've grown my organization, it's been about who I become. Your business, just so you know, it will never outgrow you as the leader. And one of the biggest things to know is that, listen, A players don't work for C- leaders. I'm just going to tell you that. They will not follow you. If you don't know how to lead, you will not have anybody that will follow you. And I will tell you, the amount of things that I've learned about being a successful business owner, it's just, there's too many things to count. So I will tell you, going back to the initial story, so opening the company, right? So officially I opened the company with God's blessing on my business, and the business started pouring in left and right. And they always say that when you're in alignment with your mission and you're in alignment with who you are and who you're supposed to be, you're going to receive help from resources that you never even knew existed. I had people calling me that I don't even know how they got my name or my number. And I was just like, oh my gosh. And I was just helping person after person after person. And I don't even know how they found me. But it was because I was in alignment with my purpose. And so it was really cool to see just this little tiny thing that all of a sudden just got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And it has just, I'm honestly dumbfounded as to why I've gotten here. I'm still amazed at the grace that God has put on my life. And I truly believe that I am put here to serve people and to help people in a very magnificent way. And I feel like I've barely scratched the surface. And I'm so grateful that I have even this podcast, because this is another springboard for me to help and just accomplish the mission that I've been put on this earth to fulfill. And so building the business, there have been more ups and downs than you could ever imagine. Building a business, the things that I went through, I never could have expected or prepared for them. I still remember when I first started, I could barely afford a laptop. And, this thing was old and decrepit, and I didn't even have a mouse attached to it. And so it was crazy. So as every good entrepreneur does, I was every role in the organization, right? I was the enrollment specialist, I was the servicer, I was the marketer, I did all the finance, I was doing all of the updates, I was doing what's called the investigation. So I was actually doing all the processing work. So and I now have 5 departments within my firm. But I was doing the work of every single person in that firm until I couldn't handle anymore. And then I started hiring people. But one of the things that I wanted to talk to everybody about that's really important, because obviously I run a firm that helps people with their credit. I want to talk to you about starting your business the right way. So when I started my company, my business, right, so I had to get merchant processing set up. I had to get all of these little things set up that you would just never even think of. There's certain states that if you want to do business in them, you have to have what's called a bond, a surety bond. So when you go and you get merchant processing and you get surety bonds and you need a lease for, where you're looking to maybe rent a little office space, everything I went to go acquire, I had no issue acquiring it. And it was because I had phenomenal credit. And the other thing is, so when I started establishing my business credit, I knew enough to at least start building it. But then like much later on, I would actually start digging a lot deeper to actually find out really what business credit is, which is, there's a lot to it, and I'll do another podcast on that. But essentially, right, so I started separating my personal credit from my business credit, and I knew enough to know what type of credit cards reported to personal versus business. So I went and I got a really great credit card for the business. And so I went for a great credit card and I got approved no problem, because why? I had an 800 credit score. And my merchant processors were like amazed. Like, so in the beginning, because I didn't establish any credibility, I paid a lot for my merchant processing. And then as the business got established, I was able to move to better and better processors. And so even my merchant processor to this day, like I just moved to a new processor about 2 years ago, and they were like, you literally have the single-handedly best credit out of any of our clients. And I was like, really? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, well, send all of those clients over to me then so I can help them. And so people don't realize that your merchant processing, your fees are going to be a lot higher, right? And that cuts into, right, the profitability of the company and what you can use, what kind of resources you're going to have left over, right, to be able to hire people, to build systems, to obviously have, any sort of like nice office space, whatever you want to use the money for, right? That profitability is going to be cut into if your credit is lackluster. If you want bonds, like a surety bond, right? If you have bad credit, your bond is probably going to cost like 5 times as much as mine, right? So credit is going to have a major, major impact as to how you grow your business. And so if you're ever looking for funding for the business, right, obviously they're going to look at your personal credit first, and then they're going to be able to determine, right, what you're eligible for under the business. So the biggest thing to know is that I established my personal credit properly to ensure that when I opened the business, that I wouldn't have any issues when I was opening up the business. So if you are looking to open up your own company, you need to get your personal credit into healthy standing. 680 minimum generally is what we like our business clients to see. So we won't even take you on as a business client if you don't have a 680 credit score or higher, because the terms are just, they're not good terms. And we don't want to take you on as that type of client until you actually hit that threshold. So that was one of the most important things that I did, because I established my business, right, on a solid foundation. And I would say this too, I get a lot of questions from people. Like I go to a lot of networking events and people who are like, I'm thinking of starting a business, when should I go? When should I start? And here is the best piece of advice that I have for you. If you are looking to start a business and you've picked up a little bit of momentum and you're bringing in some income, amazing. Do not quit your 9 to 5 until your business can pay all of your bills and then some. I cannot tell you how many people, they open a business, and let's be real, the statistics are real. It's very few that ever come out the other side successful. It's harder than people think. It's more time consuming than people think. There's more bumps along the way than you could ever possibly imagine. Just because you have a really good skill doesn't mean you're going to have a great business. And so what you need to do is build the business while you work your 9 to 5. Keep your income steady, because the one thing you don't need is you don't need something hanging over your head, right? Like you're trying to build this business, something you're super passionate about, something you're really good at. You don't want to be trying to pay your bills while trying to build this thing. I would highly suggest keeping your 9 to 5 until this thing pays your bills and then some. I wish that I could tell every business owner in the world this before they had made the mistake, because I can't tell you how many people come to us after the fact. They personally leveraged their own credit finances against the business, and the business fell apart. So their personal credit was the one that took a hit. And so I encourage all of you, lay the groundwork first so at least you can build on a solid foundation. So I do want to talk about one thing that's really important, and I think it's being resourceful. And so one of the most important things that you can do as a business owner is you constantly need to be putting yourself in rooms with people who are much, much smarter than you, who have built the thing and who are on their way back, because they can help you understand how to navigate this complex process along the way without you having to go through multiple fumbles if they've already done it, they can tell you how to avoid it. And I think one of the biggest things that I have seen is working with people who are smarter than me has really changed my business in such a magnificent way. And it has given me the infrastructure, and I have this really amazing team of people now, but it's because I've met all these amazing people along the way that have helped me implement these new systems, processes, and teams, and so I would say always put yourself in rooms with the best of the best. Always look for resources. Tony Robbins always says, he's like, we don't lack resources, we lack resourcefulness. And that's a fact. Where there is a will, there is a way. And you just don't know who you're going to meet. And something great that I've always said is that in 5 years from now, you're going to be the exact same person that you are today. 2 things will change: the books you read and the people you meet. Don't take that lightly. You need to constantly be absorbing information. I think the average CEO makes like 300 times the amount of like the lowest paid worker, but they also absorb 300 times more the information. Like, I'm always amazed when I just talk to people. I talk to everyone. I love everyone. And I'm like, oh, what's the last book you read? Like, I don't read. I don't like to read. I'm like, what? I'm like, what do you mean you don't like to read? I'm like, there's Audible. There's so many ways that you can read. You don't have to just like pick up a book. You can listen to them now. And so one of the things that I'm seeing is that if you're not devouring information, you're going to struggle. You have an opportunity when you pick up a book to speak with some of the greatest minds that exist on this earth. And it's literally having a conversation with some of the greatest minds on the earth. And so I implore you to pick up a book and to get in rooms and meet as many people as you possibly can, because you don't know who that person might be. It could be your next best friend. It could be your next business partner. It could be someone like my now best friend, right? She is also like responsible for helping me grow my entire company. She has resources beyond resources that my company utilizes every day. She helps me find the most talented people for my organization to continue to help my team grow the correct way. And without her, our company wouldn't be what it is. And I met her because I went to an awesome event where it was industry exclusive and she just happened to be there. But God puts these things together because he knows what you need and who you need when you need it. And so I just wanted to take this time to just reflect, because 4 years in business as an entrepreneur, we've barely scratched the surface. I'm so grateful to be where we are today, but I wanted to give you a little bit of my story. And I wanted to tell you that something that somebody once told me, like when I was waiting for my husband and when I was waiting for all these things to materialize, I didn't know what they were. But even when I was waiting for my husband, I was just in a place where I was just searching, and my heart just craved this companionship. And my mentor used to tell me, he's like, Micah, God is preparing him for you and he's preparing you for him. But also, I just want you to know, like, running a business, God was preparing me to run this business, and that was something that I didn't realize. So had I been given this business, let's say even 10 years ago, I would have destroyed it, completely and utterly destroyed it. And it's because I didn't have the character that I have today. I am not the woman that you see before you today. I hadn't fixed what needed to be fixed. I still had all these broken things that hadn't been addressed. And so just know, if you're feeling discouraged, just know God's not done with you yet. He's making you into the person that you're supposed to be, so that when he does bless you, then you know how to properly care for those blessings. And something really awesome that I want to leave you with, and this is actually something that I listened to the other day, and I love Layla Hermosi. I listen to a lot of her podcasts. She has a podcast called Build, and she was talking about the difference between rushing and moving quickly. And so when you rush, you tend to make a lot of mistakes. And when you move quickly, you're oftentimes in alignment with what you're doing. And so the mind is clear, versus when you're rushed, you're just trying to force something, right? Like, so I always think about, like, you're trying to force, a square peg into a round hole, right? Like, think about it. If you do that, you force it, yeah, maybe you get it through the hole, but like all of a sudden you've ruined the square peg and it doesn't fit properly and it might not go through all the way. Long story short, right? You're going to make a lot of mistakes if you rush. So here's what I would implore all of you is when we rush, we tend to make a lot of mistakes. And so as much as we want what we want, when we want it now, it's really important that we all practice this patience that we all need to have. And I know it's easier said than done. It's really, really hard to have patience, especially like when the heart is yearning for what the heart is yearning for, right? So they say hope deferred makes the heart sick. And so I want you to keep that hopeful attitude and just know that God is faithful. What he promises, he will return. He will give you. And I just want you to know, because I'm a walking, living, breathing testimony, that God does real miracles on this earth. And he does them every single day. So if you stay steadfast, if you stay true to the mission, if your heart is pure, if your goal and your intent is to help people and to serve people, and your mission isn't about greed or hurting people, then you will find your journey will be blessed. And the biggest thing, I want you to walk with eyes open. There was a really great pastor that came through to our church, and his name was Anthony Young. He wrote an amazing book, and it was Finding Purpose in Pain. And he was talking about his journey in life, and he was trying to go down this path that God just wouldn't bless. He just kept hitting roadblock after roadblock after roadblock, and God just wasn't God just kept blocking the path. He's like, oh, okay, all right. Well, I guess this is not my path. And then all of a sudden he realized that this other path, so he thought he was supposed to be a pastor, and God was like, no, like you're supposed to do market ministry. I need you to be in ministry through your business, and I need you to open up a business and grow a business, and God bless that business. So I need you to have eyes wide open. Pray for eyes wide open. Allow God, just allow him to allow you, or tell him, ask him, say, will you allow me to see what it is that you want me to see? And just be open to the process that God's going to have you go through. And I want you to know, I think one of the secrets to happiness is this, and I have said this for 15 years. This was me original before I went to any crazy like Tony Robbins seminar. This was me. I was deeply like sitting in my thoughts, and I just came up with this profound statement. And I said, the blueprint to being happy is this, is you cannot marry an outcome and be attached to that and say, if I just have this, then I will be happy. The blueprint to being happy is I'm happy for where I am right now, because if you're listening to this podcast, you're alive, you're breathing, you at least have a means to be able to listen or see this podcast. So we have something to be grateful for. Live in the moment. And this is something where I always tell people, if we're so focused on a certain type of outcome and we're like, this is what, I have to have in order to be happy, you're never going to be happy. You can have a goal and you can have an idea of what it is that you want, but you have to be okay if your life is like this, like a fishtail. Because I will tell you, my life, like even growing this business, and I don't even want to get into it right now because there's so much to it, but even growing this business, it was like this. I had this vision of what it was going to look like, and it went like this. And my business right now is not at all what I envisioned in the beginning. In fact, it's greater than what I ever envisioned. And as the Bible says, eye hath not seen, ear hath not heard, nor is what is in the heart of mankind is what the Lord hath in store for you. So he has something bigger in store for you than what you could ever possibly imagine. Trust him. Find faith in him. Thank you so much for being here today on this episode of Rebuild and Rise. My name is Micah Smith. God bless.